Oh my God, I believe I've been muted this whole time, so I'm really sorry about that, everybody. Um, yeah, let's check the live chat now. Well, the good news is that I only have one viewer at the moment. So, welcome to Alive and Thriving. I was muted for the first part of that, and we're going to be covering some topics that you may be able to use, some techniques that you might be able to employ when you are communicating with your normie friends about the conversation. The conversation goes something like this: Nate, Alive and Thriving, or you, Sally, Joe, Bob, what the hell is going on? So I had a normie friend come to me when President Trump was removed from all of the social media platforms and Spotify back in 2020. And he had one question: what the hell is going on? I began to explain from my perspective, my informed position at that time, what I believed was going on. That individual could not handle more than about 5 minutes of explanation. So, point number one: when you are communicating with normie friends and family members, only share about 10% of what you're trying to say. And in fact, uh, tease them. Tease them a lot. Tease them with things like, "Oh no, it's not something that you would even care about," or "No, you wouldn't get it. Like it's just something that I'm interested in." Like, play it off. Try to make it sound as though it's something that's either not something they would be interested in, because that's going to pull them, that's going to get them to pull it out of you. Ultimately, what I have found to be the best way of communicating controversial points or wisdom to anybody is for them to ask you questions and then you answer their questions. Because in our community, we're no strangers to the saying, you cannot tell anyone anything. They have to experience it for themselves. Like, the truth cannot be told, it has to be shown. Like, it can't be shown, it has to be lived. And that has been my experience with wisdom. The only way that I've ever absorbed anything or learned anything was by actually living it, actually immersing myself. So I do feel compelled to kind of share some of my personal story with you, but I haven't really prepared today that for that presentation, so we're just not going to do that. I think the best place to start the conversation with people about what's going on is Operation High Jump. Because if you go back in time any further than that, which you definitely you can go back to like 1876, you can go back to the 14th Amendment time period when that was happening, and you can talk about the end of the Civil War, and you could talk about taking loans from the City of London to pay off post Civil War debt, which the United States did not need to do, but did anyways. And then I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole any further. I think Operation High Jump is the best place to start. 1947, Admiral Lee Burt, Admiral Nimitz, and Forrestal, they put together a armada. They sail from the United States, Norfolk, Virginia, down to Antarctica. They're trying to get to Little America. It's, I guess, a chunk of land in Antarctica. And the fleet was so large that everybody at the time was like, well, are you invading Antarctica? Because that's the size of the fleet that you have here. In my learning, in my educated understanding, that is exactly what Admiral Lee Byrd was heading down to Antarctica to do, to invade the continent. Why? Because the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, had determined that they'd done a census on the country of Germany, and they had determined that there were about 250,000 people unaccounted for, not to include like missing in action or killed in action, that there were about 250,000 people that were missing from the German higher elite military hierarchy. Those individuals, it was determined, had to be in Antarctica because there were reports coming out of Chile and Argentina that there were Germans in Chile and Argentina for a time period before 1947, and that they were no longer there, that there were some, they were living up in like the mountains and stuff, but the majority of these Germans that the Chileans and the Argentinians had seen with their U-boats, with their submarines, weren't there anymore. So the next logical conclusion is that if they're not in South America, there's only one place further south that you can go, and that's Antarctica. Now, it was also known from explorations down to Antarctica before 1947 that there were geothermal caves, and there are still to this day geothermal caves, naturally occurring wells and springs and stuff of natural gases that melt the ice in such a way that you get these caverns, you get these massive caves beneath the ice of Antarctica. And then because it's a continent itself, there's land, there's stone, there's earth. So what they did for the public, for the United States public and the public of the West, was that they produced this wartime documentary and they sold the American people on Antarctica is the last great reservoir of raw materials, raw goods, gold, silver, coal. Coal was the big one because that was the like coal and oil. Oil was going to later become the driving force of the world economy and automobiles and planes and trains. But coal at that time was bigger than oil. Oil was about to supersede it, but coal was still the driving North American fossil fuel at that time. So they were going to go and try to secure as much of that as possible, plus other things, right? Whatever else they could find in terms of raw material. So the American public was sold that lie. And the truth was that they were going to go down there and try to root out these 250,000 missing Germans. Now the story goes that when Admiral Lee Byrd and his armada got to Antarctica, they were encountered by Bell craft. That is Bravo Echo Lima Lima, Bell, Bell craft. Flying saucers. And Admiral Lee Byrd, I'm jumping ahead here, when he got back from that said armada and he was given a closed door debrief, he was given a closed door briefing to the Joint Chief of Staffs. He told them that the next war wouldn't be fought with kinetic weaponry, that it would be fought with lasers, to paraphrase and simplify as much as possible. So that was what hit his helicopters, some of his tanks, and some of his seaplanes, according to Admiral Lee Byrd, that they were taken out by non-kinetic weaponry. It was like photon, particle beam, laser type weaponry. They also found liquid water at the South Pole. So you got this massive, continent covered in ice, but right in the middle at the South Pole was liquid water. Now, it is also said, and we don't have any evidence of this, but it is also said that at said South Pole, rather than liquid water, there's actually an entrance, like a hole, like a giant cave that goes clear down underground. And that if you go far enough, that you're going to find subterranean civilizations, these geothermal caves. And the theory goes that if you go far enough down inside of these holes, that you're going to find breakaway civilizations. So I'm going to read for you now I'm going to share my screen. Yep, share that. We're going to go to Operation High Jump, share this. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit here from this article for you. And it is by Eric Coron from Gray Falcon website. That's a little bit too, that's perfect actually. So in 1947, Admiral Richard E. Byrd led 4,000 military troops from the U.S., Britain, and Australia in an invasion of Antarctica called Operation High Jump. At least one follow-up expedition after that. This is, in fact, undeniable, but the part of the story that is seldom told, at least in official circles, is that Byrd and his forces encountered heavy resistance to their Antarctic venture from flying saucers and had to call off the invasion. This aspect of the story was pushed forward again few years later when a retired rear admiral allegedly living in Texas who had been involved in the invasion said he was shocked when he read material from a documentary entitled Fire from the Sky. He allegedly claimed that he knew that there had been a lot of aircraft and rocket shoot downs, but did not realize the situation was as serious as the documentary presented it. Operation High Jump, which was basically an invasion of Antarctica, consisted of three naval battle groups which departed Norfolk, Virginia on December 2nd, 1946. They were led by Admiral Byrd's command ship, the icebreaker Northwind, and consisted of the catapult ship Pine Island, the destroyer Brownson, the aircraft carrier Philippine Sea, the U.S. submarine Senate, and two supported vessels, Yankee and Merrick. Two tankers, Caniston and Kapistad, and the destroyer Henderson, and a float plane Kurdichuk, a British Norwegian force, and a Russian force, and I believe some Australian Canadian forces are also involved. All right, so the ship served. Yeah, they talk about Pine Island there. We don't really need to know about that ship too much. All right. So this is also Pine Island stuff. We don't need to read any more about Pine Island. All right, so to get stranger still, Admiral Lee Byrd declared that it was imperative for the United States to initiate immediate defense measures against hostile regions. Furthermore, Byrd stated that he didn't want to frighten anyone unduly, but that it was a bitter reality that in case of a new war, the continental United States would be attacked by flying objects, which could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. And that comes from a March 5th, 1947. The El Mercurio newspaper of Santiago, Chile, had a headline article on board the Mount Olympus on the high seas, which quoted Byrd in an interview with Lee Van Otta. Then I just read to you what the quote from that interview. Interestingly, not long before he made these comments, the admiral had recommended defense bases at the North Pole. These were not isolated remarks, Admiral Byrd later repeated. Each of these points of view, resulting from what he described as his personal knowledge gathered both at the North and the South Poles, before a news conference held for International News Service. He was hospitalized and was not allowed to hold any more press conferences. Still, in March 55, he was placed in charge of Operation Deep Freeze. So who was the enemy that owned or flew these flying objects? Germany was apparently defeated, and there was no evidence that the new emerging enemy, Russia, certainly had such superior technologies. They were, like the United States, only on the verge of the rocket age and totally dependent upon technology and expertise captured from Germany at the end of the war. There was no other known threat that could account for the United States invasion of Antarctica, nor for the development of any craft that could fly from pole to pole with incredible speeds. Of course, the Roswell incident had been in the news in the past summer, but it had been officially, quote unquote, explained and hushed up by the time Operation High Jump began. And here you see some images, some artistic renderings of some submarines, German submarines with Bellcraft hovering above them. Rumors began to circulate that even though Germany had been defeated, a selection of military personnel and scientists had fled the fatherland as Allied troops swept across mainland Europe and established themselves at a base on Antarctica, from where they continued to develop advanced aircraft based on extraterrestrial technologies. It is interesting to note that at the end of the war, the Allies determined that there were 250,000 Germans unaccounted for, even taking into account casualties and deaths. This would be quite a population base for a fledgling colony and provide the essential degree of skills, expertise, and pure manpower for an industrial base of any sort, let alone the production of, even by today's standards, extremely high technology. All unidentified flying object researchers are, of course, aware of the multitude of reports concerning sightings of flying saucers with swastikas or iron crosses on them, aliens speaking German, etc. Most have also heard of abductees who have been taken to underground bases with swastika emblems on the walls, or, as in the case of noted abductee Alex Christopher, have seen reptilioids or Nazis working together aboard anti-gravity craft or within underground bases. Barney Hill was apparently not the only one to describe the so-called Nazi connection, the unidentified flying object abductions. However, reports such as Christopher's and Hill's must be taken with a rather large grain of salt. There is a far more plausible explanation than the so-called reptilioids. Another noted example is the American Reinhold Smith, a man whose father was born in Germany and who tells in his book Incident at Kearney that he was taken on a flying saucer on several occasions. Schmidt states that the crew spoke German and acted like German soldiers. He also stated that they took him to the polar region. Now, one must admit that if a person were making up such a story, why would they claim to be taken, of all places, to the pole? Of course, one must also realize that at the time of Schmidt's comments, the rumors of secret Nazi bases at the poles were already fairly common. After returning, he was allegedly subjected to persecution by the U.S. government. In his defense, it must be noted that his description of the aerial discs, as he called them, matched pictures captured from the Germans in the final days of the Second World War. In 1959, 3 large newspapers in Chile reported front-page articles about unidentified flying object encounters in which the crew members appeared to be German soldiers. In the early 1960s, there were reports in New York and New Jersey of flying saucer aliens who spoke German or English with a German accent. Nor can it be neglected to mention that in one of the most spectacular legal cases of the 20th century, the atomic espionage trials, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg spoke of warships of space. Since they had access to top secret information, and at that point no reason to lie, what was it exactly that they meant? So now we get to the point. In 1947, only months after the famous Roswell incident, the Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, sent a naval task force to Antarctica, including Admiral Nimitz, Cruson, and Byrd. Operation High Jump was touted as an expedition to find coal deposits and other valuable resources, but the facts indicate otherwise. In actuality, they were apparently trying to locate an immense underground base constructed by the Germans before, during, and immediately after the Second World War with the aid of alien entities, which were described as Aryans. This base was allegedly located in New Schwabenland, an area of Antarctica which Germany explored and claimed before the outbreak of the Second World War. In fact, Germany had done a very detailed study of Antarctica and were alleged to have built a small underground base there before the war. At this point, one must ask why the United States, and in fact her allies, suspected that German activity at the poles was continuing. After the conclusion of the Second World War, the answer, quite honestly, has nothing at all to do with flying objects. That part of the story came to light from a completely different set of sources. The fact is that there was plenty of evidence at the time to indicate that as late as 1947, elements of the Kriegsmarine, or German Navy, were still very much active in the South Atlantic, operating either out of South America or some base previously unsuspected in the Antarctic. Many stories were circulating at the time, one of which even has a German U-boat stopping an Icelandic whaler named Juliana in Arctic waters. In 1947, and insisting that its captain, named Hekla, sell the U-boat crew supplies for her available stores. And in exchange for the supplies, which had been paid for in US dollars, along with a $10 bonus to each member of Juliana's crew, the U-boat commander told the whaler where a large school of whales were to be found. Hekla and his crew later found the whales in the exact position claimed by the U-boat commander. The presence of such boats at late construction Type 11 and Type 13 U-boats with the snorkel that allowed them to make the entire passage from Germany submerged was no secret. And there's a picture of this. Said snorkel. All right, an advanced submarine snorkel. Yep. All right, so many were thought to be operating out of Argentina, possibly under the Argentine flag, but crewed by Germans. The fact that in the dying moments of the Second World War, 10 U-boats based in Oslofjord, Hamburg, and Flensburg were made available to transport several hundred German officers and officials to Argentina to found a new Reich is widely accepted. So these officers, mostly involved in secret projects, and many of whom were members of the SS and Kriegsmarine itself, sought to escape the vengeance of the Allies and continue their work abroad. The U-boats were filled with their luggage, documents, and more than likely gold bullion to finance their efforts, and all the U-boats departed their home ports between 3 and 8 May 1945. They were to proceed to Argentina, where they would be welcomed by the friendly regime of Juan Perón and his charismatic wife, Eva Perón. 7 of the 10 of the U-boats, based on the German-Danish border, set off for Argentina through the Kattegat, blah, blah, blah. None were ever seen again. It has been, however, documented that 3 of the boats did, in fact, arrive in Argentina, and these were those numbers right there, blah, 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 surrendered to the Argentine Navy at Mar del Plata in early July and August of 45, and the U-1238 was scuttled by her crew in the waters of San Matias Gulf off northern Patagonia. 7 boats are, as yet, unaccounted for, and Kriegsmarine archives recently discovered indicate that a total of more than 40 boats are completely unaccounted for, all of which were late construction, state-of-the-art craft, and could have either made the Argentina or Antarctica completely submerged and completely unnoticed by existing Allied technology of the time for the entire duration of their crossing. So just to recap that really quick, in the late 1945, between 3 and 8 March, there were up to 40 state-of-the-art German boats that left Europe and made an entirely submerged journey to South America, the southern parts of South America, and Antarctica. So up to 40 ships carrying a lot of Germans and gold and food made their way to Antarctica, and they did it to continue on the Third Reich, or to establish the Fourth Reich. The question arises, of course, why these men would make such a perilous crossing. It must surely be seen as an act of either desperation or fanaticism, or both. And such men as crewed U-boats were neither, nor were the scientists and military officers who were their passengers. The fact is, it would seem that most of those who fled the ruin of Germany to the far south were scientists and engineers, and their dedication sprang from the project on which they were working. Dude, if you had mastered the exact, let me switch my screen right here. All right, so if you had mastered the exact ratios of combining mercury and gold and then spinning them in such a manner that you were able to achieve anti-gravity, which is the extremely layman's term version for how the Germans achieved anti-gravity. And again, if this is all Greek to you, that's perfectly fine. I've spent the past 7 years studying nothing other than reality. That's what I call it. And if none of this is pinging on your radar, it's because you have not spent the past 7 years studying reality. Unfortunately, you were probably inside of a pod, exactly like they show in the Matrix, being fed a steady diet of propaganda and processed food. So that is kind of where humanity currently exists. You have a highly educated and highly intelligent group of humanity that has had their finger on the pulse for the past 7, 10, some people maybe 15 years, maybe 4 years, ever since 2020. And then you've got everybody else who has persisted with the status quo of consumerism and materialism, and they are woefully unaware of reality, history, and what the truth and freedom community believes will be the future of this country. So continuing on with the article here, let's go back to the screen. To understand this dedication, it is necessary to go back before the outbreak of the Second World War to an isolated selection of the Bavarian Alps. It was there in the summer of 1938 that an unidentified flying object, crewed by a distinctly human and Aryan appearing race, made a forced landing very similar to the one which was to occur some 10 years later in the desert near Roswell, New Mexico, in the United States. While these occupants of the two craft were completely unrelated, technology involved seems to have been strikingly similar. Also, the outcome of the recovery effort undertaken by Germany, just as a similar recovery effort was undertaken by the United States, had strikingly different results. The Bavarian crash of 1938 seems to have yielded an functioning or almost functioning and repairable with the technology of the time power plant and a nearly completely destroyed or unrepairable airframe. The Roswell crash resulted in exactly the opposite, a nearly intact airframe and a ruined power plant. So really quick, I want to talk about, in my opinion, why in 1938, Germany got an intact power plant, but a non-intact airframe. And then in Roswell, the United States gets an intact airframe and a non-intact power plant. So my understanding of how extraterrestrials communicate with humanity in terms of imparting technology to try to help the race advance. The benevolent extraterrestrials are always going to do these things called stair-step evolution. So what you have in the case of ancient Egypt is you see ancient Egypt go from being an agrarian civilization to, like, in the matter of 3 years, mastering aqueducts and figuring out how to transport water long distances to farms and to fields and even into cities. So this is called stair-step evolution. It's where the dominant race, humanity in this case, is kind of trucking along with a set amount of technological expertise and technology, period. And then all of the sudden in the historical record, you see, like, okay, humanity has like 1 unit of technology. We're in the Stone Age, we're in the Bronze Age, we're in the Iron Age. And then all of a sudden they've got 13 units of technology in the matter of 5 years. And that would look like aqueducts and canals and sewage canals, and then later like indoor plumbing. So that is an example of stair-step evolution. It's like going from being like a Stone Age kind of primitive race to all of a sudden they have running water. It's like, did one person invent that and then it caught wildfire? Yes, that's definitely a phenomenon. But the theory that I subscribe to, and I'm not alone in this, is that it's kind of really 2 schools of thought. You have an individual like a Thomas Edison or like a Nikola Tesla or a Da Vinci who raises their consciousness to such a level where an extraterrestrial is going to feel it is acceptable in like the mind, in the sight of God, in accordance with the quote unquote prime directive, as start to use a Star Trek term, that person would be able to receive communication about advanced technology in relation to where their current civilization in the time of Da Vinci was kind of operating. And then a guy like Da Vinci could then put forth plans for the aeroplane, for a helicopter, for all kinds of different technologies. So it's because in the case of like Da Vinci, that individual was spending so much time creating beautiful works of art and invention that in him doth the extraterrestrials see a suitable and willing consciousness to serve as a channel for more advanced technology to enter into humanity's experience of life. Said another way, you could think of it as like you've got Yeah, I think I said it perfect. I think I said it good enough the way I said it the first time. You've got someone who is doing the work, like someone is pursuing, they are knocking, right? Knocking, it shall be opened unto thee. Someone's knocking at that door, asking for greater access to wisdom or to knowledge or technology. And then they get an intuition, they get an intuitive, inspiring vision or thought, or they even hear someone speak to them, or in certain cases, maybe like the upper room with the disciples and Jesus. So out of nowhere, Jesus appears in the room with them, and they get to examine his hands, and that type of experience takes place for them. That type of experience was kind of the disciples in the upper room, kind of doing the work, um, being they wanted to see Jesus again. There was expectation, there was desire, and then Jesus came to them. You got an individual like Nikola Tesla. He's like, I want to see humanity achieve energy independence and liberation. And then knowledge and wisdom comes to his mind, and he brings it into the world, and he develops the plans, and he gives them to humanity. In the case of Da Vinci, the same thing. Tons of inventions and tons of plans, and humanity was really needing them. And Da Vinci was the guy to be like, hey, look, humanity needs these things. And so I'm going to sit here kind of in contemplation and meditation. And then they're going to come to me, and I'm going to write them down. I'm going to draw them out, and then I'm going to gift them to humanity. In the case of the Buddha, the same thing. The Buddha was looking around. He noticed that there were 4 types of suffering that everybody was going to inevitably experience. So he sat down beneath a Bodhi tree, and he sat down with the express intent and the purpose of, quote unquote, figuring it all out. When he did, then he was implored to begin teaching, and then he did. He began his teaching career, and he taught, and then we get Buddhism, and we get the fivefold path, and we get right think, wrong think. We get a great explanation of, if you are curious and if you do want to walk the path, then the Buddha gives you a very well developed and laid out path for you to walk. Now, is it a path of religion? No, it's a path of how to live your life. And so Jesus does the same thing. Jesus comes to humanity during a time when humanity is in its most fallen state, which is to say that humanity's vibration, their frequency, or their consciousness at the time that Jesus was walking the earth was in its most warring and barbaric time period. The Romans they lived and died by the sword, and their empire consisted of expansion. So there was a classic saying in Rome that if Rome is expanding, then Rome is thriving. If Rome is contracting, then Rome is dying. I'm paraphrasing. So Jesus comes, and because humanity is so dense at that time, humanity was at that time really only thinking in terms of like kill or be killed, live by the sword, who's got my money? That's the common term for today's parlance. And Jesus gives a very simple command to everybody, which is love thy neighbor as thyself. So you got the Buddha, who gives like a dissertation, a full-on roadmap for how to live your life. And then you got Jesus comes, says, love thy neighbor as thyself. He simplifies it down as much as possible. Why? Because humanity was an incredibly kind of simple creature, a simple species at that time. So they had to be spoken to as children. They had to be spoken to very simplistically. Because why? Because their whole entire reality existed of adobe, bronze, and some iron, right? And water and wine and food and agriculture and animal husbandry. So they weren't contemplating the cosmos, the majority of humanity at that time. They weren't contemplating anti-gravity. They weren't contemplating what's on the other end of the world. They were just like, God, I hope I don't get killed by a roaming band of criminals today. And I hope that a centurion doesn't rape my daughter and stuff like that. So in this day and age, however, fast forwarding to 1938, you have a lot of people in Europe becoming very occult. and meeting in basements and having seances and having get-togethers, and they are discussing the mysteries of the universe. It was a time period at the turn of the century, the 20th century. It was a time period in which humanity was very interested in the esoteric, very interested in lost civilizations, lost technologies. So what the Germans do is they send expedition parties over to Nepal and Tibet and India and China, and they start looking for these texts about Vimana, which is spellcraft, spaceships, because the Hindu texts talk extensively about Vimana and fire from the sky. So flying earth ships, spaceships, and particle photon weaponry. So the Germans are like, well, that would give us a huge advantage in this war of global domination that we're about to undertake. So let's go find that text. Let's go see if we can reverse engineer from their drawings these craft. They did it. They go back to Germany. And then at that same time, because they are so interested in doing all of this, ask and you shall receive happens. So even if you're asking for malevolent type things, there are entities, there are aspects of God. That's going to be a controversial statement, but there are aspects of God that if you, me, desire to be of service to self with the intention of gaining power over others, you will be given tools and techniques to achieve those goals. Everything is, in my understanding, everything is part of the one infinite creator. So even if it is something malevolent, it is all still subsisting and residing and occurring within the one infinite creator, and therefore could be looked at as an aspect or a face of God. The devil can be viewed in that light. The devil can be viewed as like this individual that has psychosis, psychopathy. Like they understand that they're a part and parcel of God, but they hate themselves, that aspect, that loving aspect of themselves so much. So what they do is they engage in nonstop perversion and murder and all kinds of really heinous things to try to like kill the goodness inside of them, but it can never be choked out. And that's why it keeps going about trying to do the most egregious and heinous stuff. So I digress. 1938, you get that craft crashing in Europe. 1955, we get or whenever Roswell happened, we get Roswell. And it is technology being given to humanity. It is an effort on the part of extraterrestrials to help humanity achieve homeostasis, harmony, unity, a better life for everyone. Now, unfortunately, as we can see playing out in Washington, D.C. right now, there are individuals who just do not care about anything other than their own power. And that's exactly what took place during this time period, which we're talking about around Operation High Jump. You have individuals who are only concerned with domination and power over others. And then you got individuals, the Admiral Lee Birds of the world, who kind of think that they know what's going on, but then they take their cold power fucking steel ships down to the frozen wastelands of Antarctica, and flying craft come out at the speed of freaking sound and boop, 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 just hit them with, pew, pew, pew. And they lose a ton of machinery and personnel in like the matter of a second. And they can't even acquire the target in the sights of their weapons to even fire on the aggressors. So that's kind of what you got going on right now with humanity. YouTube shorts are that. They are in my opinion, they are a deliberate attempt to degrade people's memory. It's YouTube shorts might as well be called goldfish food, because if you get caught in those loops What you're doing is you're training your brain to only apply concentration and memory for 1 minute at a time. So now, if I stop talking at a rapid pace like I'm doing right now, you'll lose interest and you'll check out and you'll go to a different channel. And this is something that I am personally not okay with, but I got to cater, I got to kind of walk a fine line. Granted, I only have 2 viewers, but you got to be able to keep your audience engaged. But then if you're a Christ being or you're a service to others oriented individual, you want to provide information. You want to give substance to people versus like what the shorts are typically about, which is like gotcha moments, drama and all that kind of stuff. And trauma. I mean, go over to Facebook and get in a cycle of their shorts. And it'll be like 4 or 5 shorts before you see egregious violence. You'll see people getting stabbed to death. You'll see people getting shot. You'll see people getting run over by vehicles. Why? Well, in the past, the only place that you would see, the only occasion in which you would be exposed to traumatic images like that would be in war. And it would typically only be men that would be exposed to that, unless there were bombs falling on the city of London. Then all people are exposed to trauma and war. So in the past, it would typically only be in a war footing, in a war setting, that you would experience images of death and violence. Now, all you got to do is go to Facebook and get inside of their shorts. And before you know it, dude's stabbing a guy. Before you know it, people are shooting each other. People are running each other over with cars. And what you were wanting to watch was you were wanting to watch funny videos about improv. But all of a sudden, you got to watch some dude. Recently, I saw one of a guy who was an employee at a gun store. And these 2 idiots walk in and they try to rob the gun store. So the dude at the cashier, the cashier literally just steps out of the camera's frame. The 2 bozos jump over the counter, and homeboy just gets them both with a knife. I'm like, bro, why are you showing this to me? Oh, that's right. Because you were created by the CIA and you were created deliberately to mess people's brains up. That's what all this technology is for. I guarantee you that when we get on the other side, pray to God, when we get on the other side of this great divide that we are currently in humanity, that a majority of the technological things that we have today, we're going to have better ones of them. They're going to look similar, but they're not going to be anything like what we currently have. Because everything that we currently have, all the cell phones, all the computers, those are instruments of spycraft. They weren't invented to make your life better in any way, shape, or form. They were invented to keep tabs on humanity, to know what humanity was thinking. This has been the age-old problem for tyrants. It is popular uprisings. How do you predict a popular uprising? How do you quash one before it even gets started so that the grasshoppers don't get taken out by the ants? Well, you put a shiny black mirror in everybody's pocket. It puts out a frequency. It messes up the brain. Some people get cancer from it. And everybody gets addicted to it. So then when we're running around behind the scenes executing mile markers of our agenda, nobody even notices that we're doing it because they're addicted to YouTube shorts. They're addicted to this, that, and the other thing. That's the game. It's to keep us all distracted, to keep us quote unquote asleep, so that they can execute their agenda. I'm preaching to the choir here, but I get off my soapbox. Talking about Operation High Jump, using this article like I've got here from, let me zoom out. Stillness in the Storm, an Agent of Conscious Evolution, Operation High Jump and the German UFO Connection, mid-20th century secret space program. If you talk about these types of topics, I would highly suggest that when you talk about them, don't put any emotional investment on your part into it. And don't put any emotional investment into the people that you're sharing the information with. Share this information the same way that you would if you were telling somebody, yeah, then I got into my car and I put my seatbelt on. Like, it's so, you'd be so nonchalant as you possibly can, because this information, once you go down this rabbit hole far enough, what you realize is that the world that I was born into told that America was the greatest country on earth, which it definitely is. We have the highest standard of living, and we have the greatest access to resources of the modern Western nations. So in that aspect, it definitely is the greatest nation on earth. And we do have some of the greatest people on the planet, some of the most charitable, some of the most mindful, some of the most intelligent, some of the most caring, some of the most compassionate. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I do count myself among that group of people, because all that I care about is being helpful and serving others. To the tune that I have lived the past 4 years functionally bankrupt, because the money in this nation is printed by a private organization. It's built on compounding interest, and whenever they want to, they can just inflate the supply and decrease your purchasing power. So therefore, the money in this country that everybody's going to work to get isn't valuable. It's valueless. It can be devalued whenever they choose to do so, and it can just make your whole life incredibly hard and psychologically traumatizing if what you've spent the past X amount of years doing is building up a nest egg, only to see it halved by some individual at a keyboard. Like, if you spent 5 years, right, working your butt off, and you earned and you saved $1 million, and then inflation hit the way that it is now, and your $1 million is only capable of purchasing $500,000 worth of goods and materials, compared to the 5 years ago when you started that journey, I will never put myself in that position. I will never worship that fucking thing, that Federal Reserve note. That is the devil. The mainstream media is the part that brainwashes you with their cronies in the tech industry who spy on you. And the bank, the Federal Reserve, most people, it is so many people, money is their religion. Money, consumerism, and materialism is the religion of so many normies. I will never worship that lifeless, soulless entity. And shame on you, to be completely honest, if you have. So I'll digress from that point, but you'll never see. I did it, guys. I had the 6-figure salary. I had the girl. I had the material wealth and all the possessions. And I was so god dang miserable, it wasn't even funny. I'm functionally bankrupt, and I work an average of 6.5 days a week now, but I sleep like a mother effing baby. I have my stress. I have stress in my life. There's no doubt about it. Living functionally bankrupt in North America, are you kidding me? In Florida, which is a paradise where there are beautiful people all over the place, but you just literally can't participate in the nice things that everybody else does because you typically only have like $100 in your bank account. Maybe that's too much information. I don't really care, because what am I? I am a servant unto others. I am not doing anything to try to get power over others. I am trying to empower other people, and all of my actions on a daily basis, when I am working for other people, It's strictly about beautifying their property, beautifying their life, beautifying their land. That's the beautiful thing about being self-employed. It's not for the faint of heart. Most people won't even try to do it. But nonetheless, if you do, there is a great, great sense of freedom in it, and literal freedom in it. And I want to show you this because I recorded this this week. So let me get this media up here and get this video going. Can I drag and drop? Hang on, let me drag and drop. So let me go to my downloads. This is on my desktop, and I appreciate you bearing with me as I get these uploaded here. There's a lot that can go into one of these programs. I hope you're all doing well. It looks like I've got 4 viewers on Rumble, so that's awesome. It's difficult to get on here every Sunday. I'm not gonna lie, because like I was talking about right before the stream, like I was literally sitting here asleep in this desk chair with my head like this, like 2 hours before the stream started, trying to get prepped for the show. Just because Sundays it hits me like a brick. Like I am so exhausted on Sundays, but whatever. I'm not complaining in any way, shape, or form. So this Operation High Jump business, it's definitely going to be a little bit out there for your normie friends, but it's something that you can definitely talk about. So last night at dinner, I actually was able to bring these topics up. I got asked about them, so I was able to discuss them. And so that's why I say, like, you should really probably only bring these topics up if you are asked, because otherwise people don't want to hear it. That's what I've found. We're going to get to a point, though, where even the most dense normie people are going to start asking questions. I don't think that the majority of people will be able to live in the types of denial that they have been for very much longer. So this is uploading. We're about 73%. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of kind of like behind the scenes, kind of what happens during the week in my life. And as the channel grows and as we do more content, then the programs will get more organized and I'll be able to share more value with you. So it's just taking a little while to upload these files, but we're at 91%. So they're going to be uploaded here in just a second. And I really do appreciate everybody for jumping on here and watching the show tonight. All right. So a little bit of housekeeping too. Please go and hit the like button. That's a big help for the channel. Even if you don't like the video, just help me, help me grow it. That's what I'm asking for. All right, so we got the video here. Just title it all right, create the video. Cool. Unsaved media. Let's check it out.
On one hand, I hate being self-employed.
I mean, were you even able to see that? Interesting. Stop sharing.
On one hand, I hate being
Yeah, I don't think you're able to see that. So let's just try to get one video here. Open that. All right. It's going. In the meantime, all right. All right. Going back into the article real quick. Operation High Jump. The Bavarian crash of 1938 seems to have yielded a functioning and almost functioning repairable power plant and a nearly completely destroyed or unrepairable airframe. The Roswell crash resulted in exactly the opposite, a nearly intact airframe and a ruined power plant. And because of this, the German research which was to follow took a vastly different turn from that which was undertaken in the United States some 10 years later. Germany needed an airframe which was capable of supporting the engine, for lack of a better term, while the United States would eventually need an engine capable of giving maximum performance to the airframe. This, of course, would explain the vast array of experimental aircraft aircraft of extremely unique design, to literally pour out of the design bureaus of Messerschmitt, Falkenwolf, Fokker, and multitude of smaller firms in the period between 1939 and 1945. The most notable, of course, is the Sanger Flying Wing, which was later copied by the United States and is, of course, the ancestors of today's stealth bomber and fighter designs, notably the B-2 heavy bomber. It is also beyond a doubt that both unidentified flying object recoveries are the initial impetus for the long-standing and ongoing research in anti-gravity propulsion seen in work of current aircraft manufacturers such as Boeing and Lockheed in the United States and Panavia in Europe. In any case, it was the work on reverse engineering the downed Bavarian unidentified flying object that was the catalyst for the exodus to the south in the final days of the Second World War. Germany was in ruins, and the research was viewed by those conducting it as vital enough to risk packing up all that they had and risking a perilous submerged crossing of the Atlantic to an isolated experimental research base on a frozen continent. Granted, by modern standards, even the standards of the day, U-boats were small and cramped. They had very little cargo capacity, and still a tiny fleet of them, 10 to 12 boats, could easily transport the essential equipment, making several runs and serve to supply and later resupply the Antarctic bastion of the research. Speculation exists, with much to support it, that at least one of the boats in the valiant little fleet contained the biggest prize of all, at least one living survivor of the 1938 crash, an extraterrestrial, a literal human being, not a gray, born on a distant planet. The best evidence indicates that there were several survivors of the crash and that they worked and are most likely still working with the original German scientists and engineers or their descendants in an effort to construct a viable flying disc. These are not the gray aliens of Roswell. These beings, biologically completely human, are described as Aryan in appearance and completely human, although at least 2 to 3 generations more advanced technologically than Earth-born human beings. While their technology is similar to that of the Greys in general theory, it is somewhat different, apparently, in application. This would tend to indicate that Earth technology and science is at most only one major breakthrough away from parity with the extraterrestrial cultures in questions, and also explains the urgency of the project as viewed by the German and undoubtedly United States as well, scientists and engineers involved in such research. So I'm going to pause that reading for a second, and I'm going to say that this lines up exactly with what I've learned in the past, in that science, as we currently understand it, the way that extraterrestrials or God views our science, is our effort to catch up with what God's already made. So with our science, the way that we do it, the scientific method, what we're trying to do is we're trying to explain the material world, right? Well, all of God can be explained materialistically if we so choose to do so. And at some point we will do that with, advanced communication and understanding. But until we get there, we're just kind of chasing God's perfection. I don't think that's lost on anybody with a religious background, but nonetheless, I'm going to go back to this article here. So let's go to screen. Yeah, we're back. Okay. We're viewing that tab. I want to view this tab. Screens. Oh, yeah. Presentation. That's how you do it. Boom. Rumble Studios. That's pretty cool. I'm glad that they dropped that. Seems to be free to use. It's going to be a lot better if it is, because it'll save me $25 a month on StreamYard. All right. In any case, Operation High Jump began. The task force of over 40 ships included the flagship Mount Olympus, the aircraft carrier Philippine Sea, the seaplane tender Pine Sea, and the submarine Senate. the destroyer Bronson and the icebreaker Northwind, and other tanker and supply ships. An armed contingent of 1,400 sailors and 3 dog sled teams were also on board. The expedition was filmed by the Navy and brought to Hollywood to be made into a commercial film called The Secret Land, which I'm going to show you here in a second. It was narrated by Hollywood actor Robert Montgomery, father of Bewitched star Elizabeth Montgomery, who was himself an officer in the Naval Reserve. It seems incredible that so shortly after the war, that after a war that had decimated most of Europe and crippled global economies, an expedition to Antarctica was undertaken with so much haste. It took advantage of the first available Antarctic summer after the war. At such cost and with so much military hardware, unless the operation was absolutely essential to the security of the United States, it seems that they wouldn't have done it because the global economies were so destroyed. At the time of the operation, the U.S. Navy itself was being taken apart piece by piece as the battle-tested fleet was decommissioned, with its mostly civilian crew bidding farewell to the seas forever. The Navy was even reduced to further recruitment to man the few remaining ships in service. And tensions across the globe were also mounting as Russia and America edged into a Cold War, possibly a Third World War, and the U.S. would have to fight with tragically few ships and tragically half-trained men. This made the sending of nearly 5,000 residual Navy personnel to the remote part of the planet, where so much danger lurked in the form of icebergs, blizzards, and sub-zero temperatures, even more of a puzzle. The operation was also launched with incredible speed, only a matter of weeks. Perhaps it would not be uncharitable to conclude that the Americans had some unfinished business connected with the war in the polar region. Indeed, this was later confirmed by other events and the operations leader, Admiral Byrd himself. The official instructions issued by then Chief of Naval Operations Chester Nimitz were to train personnel and tested material in the frigid zones, to consolidate and extend American sovereignty over the largest practical area of the Antarctic continent, to determine the feasibility of establishing and maintaining bases in the Antarctic, and to investigate possible base sites, to develop techniques for establishing and maintaining air bases on the ice, with particular attention to the later applicability of such techniques to Greenland, and to amplify existing knowledge of hydrographic, geographic, geologic, meteorologic, and electromagnetic conditions in the area. That was a fun little sentence to say. Little other information was released to the media about the mission, although most journalists were suspicious of its true purposes. Given the huge amount of military hardware involved, the U.S. Navy also strongly emphasized that Operation High Jump was going to be a Navy show. Admiral Ramsey's preliminary orders of the 26th August 1946 stated that the Chief of Naval Operations only will deal with other governmental agencies, and that no diplomatic negotiations are required. No foreign observers will be accepted. Not exactly an invitation to scrutiny, even from other arms of the government. Some facts, however, are well known. There were 3 divisions of Operation High Jump, 1 land group with tractors, explosives, and plenty of equipment to refurbish Little America and make an airstrip to land 6 R-4Ds, DC-3s, and R-2D2s and stuff like that, and 2 seaplane groups, the R-4Ds. Let's see, I told you R2D2 is making an appearance. Were fitted with jet assist takeoff bottles, JTOs, in order to take off from the short runway of the aircraft carrier Philippine Seas, which means that they just strapped Roman candles to the backs of their planes and said, go. They were also fitted with large skis for landing on the ice field prepared for them. The skis were specifically fitted at 3 inches above the surface of the carrier deck while landing, and blah, 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 blah. Following its arrival at Antarctica, the force began a reconnaissance of the continent, and Byrd himself was on board the first of the planes to take off on 29 Jan 47. Rocket propulsion tubes had been attached to the side of the aircraft, and from the vibration of the great carrier, Byrd later wrote, I knew when the captain had got the ship up to about 30 knots, 35 miles per hour maximum full emergency sea, We seemed to creep along the deck at first, and it looked as if we would never make it. But when our four JATO bottles went off along the sides of the plane with a terrific deafening noise, I could see the deck fall away, and I knew we had made it. Admiral Byrd's was fitted with secret trimetricon spy cameras, and each plane was trailing a magnetometer. The aircraft flew as much of the continent, and officially it was stated that he had lost an engine and had to throw everything overboard except the films themselves and the results of the magnetometer readings in order to maintain altitude long enough. And over the next 4 weeks, the plane spent 220 hours in the air, flying a total of 22,700 miles, and then the mission that had been expected to last for about 6 to 8 months came to an early and faltering end. The Chilean press reported that the mission had run into trouble and that there had been many fatalities. However, the official record states that one plane crashed, killing 3 men. A 4th man had perished on the ice. 2 helicopters had gone down, although their crews had been rescued, and a task force commander was nearly lost. It is an indisputable fact that the central group of Operation High Jump were evacuated by the Burton Island icebreaker from the Bay of Whales on 22 February 47. The Western group headed home. In the end, the task force came steaming back to the United States with their data, which then immediately became classified top secret. Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, retired and started to talk not only about high jump, but about other things as well. He was put in Bethesda Naval Hospital psychiatric ward, where he was prevented from seeing or talking to anyone, including his wife. And after a short while, he was thrown out the window while trying to hang himself with a bedsheet. So the story goes, it was, of course, ruled a suicide, case closed. However, some of what he knew, Operation High Jump, about Roswell and other things, did manage to leak. How much is truth, how much is speculation, is difficult to tell. However, in every myth, there is a grain of truth. This much is certain. As incredible as it may sound, there is a considerable supporting evidence for these claims about a German base in Antarctica. On the very eve of the Second World War, the Germans themselves had invaded part of Antarctica and claimed it for the Third Reich. In fact, Hitler had authorized several expeditions to the poles shortly before World War II. Their stated objective was to either rebuild and enlarge Germany's whaling fleet or test out weaponry in severely hostile conditions. Yet, if true, all of this could have been achieved at the North Pole rather than at both poles and been much closer to home. A further expedition took place in the early years of the 20th century in the ship the Gauss, and then a further expedition took place in 1911 under the command of Wilhelm Faulkner and his ship the Deutschland. Between the wars, the Germans made a further voyage in 25 with a specially designed ship to the polar regions, the Meteor, under the command of Mers. And then in the years directly preceding the Second World War, the Germans laid claims to parts of Antarctica in order to set up a permanent base there. So, I think it's a good place, like I said at the very beginning, to talk to normies about what's going on in the world by talking about Operation High Jump, maybe showing them this show or others on Operation High Jump and talking to them about the reality that Germans living in Germany moved to, like, you can be very simplistic about it. There were Germans in Germany. They were fighting the war. They realized they were going to lose. So they sent a bunch of guys to Antarctica to set up a base as a fallback position in case they lost Europe. They lost Europe, but they didn't lose Antarctica. United States sent Admiral Lee Byrd and Nimitz down to Antarctica to kill them. And their mission ended way before it was scheduled to end. And they came back, and then all of them were sworn to secrecy, and one of them was suicided. So just kind of talking about that right there. And then I think this article also has, let's see if it does. There were images called the DC flyovers, and I thought that this article had a link to those images. So I'm looking for it right now. There's the Roswell incident. And I know I saw it highlighted earlier on in here. So let's do a Command F. right. Fly over. Yeah, here we go. Let's see what this takes us to. Yep. Error not found. So that's fine. Let's go to Yandex really quick. Let's do an image for DC flyover. And World War II. What did they call it? They called it UFO flyover Washington 1952. So let's search that real quick. DC flyover 1952 UFO. The Vanishing Star Enigma. UFOs swarm the Capitol. Objects discovered same day. Best cases. That's Reddit. That's UFO. With politics. The Vanishing Star Enigma 1955. Let's see what this one says. Saucer outrun jet and pilots reveal. Washington Post 1952. Any images? Any images? Any images? I don't see any, but the second weekend of context, that's the images I was looking for, guys, right there. So this is 1952. Let's save that image as desktop. All right, let's see if we can bring it in here and really zoom in. So here is the Capitol. Here is the capital of the United States, and here are these little dots. This image was taken in 1952. You can tell that this is clearly an older image with this clearly incandescent light bulbs, and then you have these lights above 1952, and this image appeared in the Washington Post, and here is the actual Washington Post headline, July 28, 1952, saucer outran jet, pilot reveals. And it is theorized, well, I'm going to share this tab. It is theorized that in this July 28th, 1952 Washington Post article, headline actually, front page, saucer outran jet, pilot reveals, that in that same article is where this image was found that I showed you here of the DC flyovers. And the theory goes, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, that when Admiral Lee Byrd got back from Antarctica, and I hope that you were able to see that one, so I'm going to stop sharing there. But when Admiral Lee Byrd got back from Antarctica and he debriefed the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he told them that the next war would be fought not with conventional weapons, but with weapons of the future and flying craft that could traverse from pole to pole with super great speeds, that then that image is, then you get these DC flyovers. So President Eisenhower is now briefed that there is a large contingent of Nazis down in Antarctica, and that we were not able, Admiral Lee Byrd tells Eisenhower, we were not able to defeat them. So Eisenhower basically gets on a radio and he starts broadcasting to Antarctica that if they do not like surrender or reveal to the world that they're down there, that the United States is going to drop A-bombs. The Nazis just send their Bellcraft and park them right over the top of the U.S. Capitol, and they say, checkmate. So United States then had to enter into a military-industrial complex with the Nazis that gave United States industrial might and manufacturing might to the Germans. So Operation Paperclip takes place. The Germans come across. They infiltrate They take over NASA. They remake NASA into their vision for outer space domination and exploration. And Eisenhower's hands get tied. And that's why in his farewell speech, he says we have to guard against unwarranted search and seizure of power by a military industrial complex at all costs, because that was his way of saying that we lost the war, guys. And I'm really sorry to say it to you. Now, imagine being in his position. Imagine being in his position, just having fought this like major land war in Europe with the technology that was employed at the time: tanks, M1 Garands, planes, boats. And then all of the sudden, you have anti-gravity craft floating over the top of the United States Capitol building, the White House. And they're telling you that you can either surrender or be wiped off the face of the earth. And you have nothing that can shoot them. You have no way to defend yourself against them. Imagine like the amount of trauma that Eisenhower had to swallow, because he had just experienced all of that. Like, that was an epoch of time, World War II. And humanity and reality and everybody thought that like we were all on a similar technological wavelength. Then to have your paradigm completely shattered by the reality that your enemy developed anti-gravity and is now sitting directly above you in your, where you thought was the safest place on earth, Washington, D.C., the White House, the Capitol building. You thought you were safe there, separated by an ocean. Germany can't get you. Now all of a sudden, there's anti-gravity Bellcraft floating over your house, telling you that you've lost. Sign these papers and give us your manufacturing and industrial might, and you can't tell a soul that you lost. You can't tell the American people that they lost. In fact, you are made a bitch, and you have to go along with with the long march through the institutions. Imagine being Eisenhower. Imagine the Germans telling him what they were going to do to the United States over the course of the next 50 to 70 years and having no recourse against it. Imagine turning then, right, to some of your generals and some of your people that you thought were on your side, and realizing that no, their family lineage goes back hundreds and thousands of years, and that actually they were always on the side of the global collectivists through the whole Second World War, and that those globalist collectivists who funded both sides of the war out of DC or out of Wall Street had already planned that World War II was in fact a part of the systematic destruction of Western values and independence and liberty for humanity in general. Imagine being Eisenhower. Imagine the high of just having won the Second World War crashing down around you and realizing that you lost the war before you started. And in fact, World War II and Pearl Harbor and every single event that transpired to get you into World War II was manufactured and created to pull you into a losing battle so that you could then be usurped, right? It's an incredible sleight of hand. Nazi globalist collectivist agents were already working within the United States and had been here for hundreds of years, were already amassed global financial dominance, and they positioned you, Eisenhower, and the people of the United States perfectly to expend your energy and your time and your resources fighting at that time period an archaic form of warfare, while you thought that you were on the cutting edge of technology, only to get done with winning that hell of a war, to then have the coup de grace come where you're like 50 to 70 years technologically obsolete, and then have to surrender, and then have to realize that you were never even in the fucking war. You were never even actually fighting. Like you were just being manipulated the whole time. Did we defeat the German army on mainland Europe? Yeah, we did. But did we defeat the Nazi ideology? No. And did we get all the people that actually mattered? We didn't get hardly probably any of them. And did Hitler die in Berlin? No. So imagine all of those realizations coming upon you and not being able to tell anyone, right? And not being able to write anything about it, right? Why? Why? Oh, because your kids are going to be dropped in vats of acid if you do. Well, that's a pretty good reason if I'm a father to not say anything, right? So I think it's a big contributing factor why so many people 30 and under, like men today, are not getting married and are not starting families. Why? Because we're in a war. It would be social, in my opinion, be socially irresponsible for me to start a family right now. Not that I don't ever have designs or plans on having one someday, but like, why in the fuck would I want to bring a child into the world the way that it currently is? Right? We have work to do. Right? If we straighten out the mess, then maybe I can think about having a life. Then maybe I can think about starting a family. But why would I put upon my plate the stress of raising a family when I'm functionally bankrupt? Because I refuse to participate in this fucking rat race and this paradigm that is materialism and consumerism. And the technology that I thought was cutting edge that I was selling to earn my six-figure income, solar panels, is just another grift. It's another scam. It's another con. And so when you realize that pretty much all of the things, all of the wares that humanity's hawking these days, unless they're making it themselves like a carpenter, it's all superfluous. It's all worthless. It's all valueless compared to what is actually being utilized in the military industrial complex. Like the thing that I would like to sell the most is pulsed electromagnetic frequency, because I'm a natural born salesman. I would love to sell that because that actually does improve people's health. But I know that within the military industrial complex that they have the med beds that you see in the movie Elysium, where all you must do is lay down on the flat surface. It assesses whatever you have going on and then just fixes it with a combination of pulsed electromagnetic frequency and quantum technology that I don't comprehend. See, it's that type of knowledge, it's that type of understanding that it's almost the exact same as like living in a prison. You know there's freedom on the outside. You know that there's the ability to do all kinds of things on the outside of the prison walls, but you're inside the prison. You can't do those things. You can't have that fun. So that's largely, how a lot of people feel about life right now. And hopefully with these actions and other actions that we're all collectively taking, we'll be able to restore reality and sanity, and more people will wake up to reality, and we could actually advance our civilization, because the 9 to 5 work in an office, stuff like that, like it's not the way. And chasing the Federal Reserve note, that's not the way. Crypto seems pretty good to go, but I guess we'll see how that goes. But getting back to kind of a little bit of personal type stuff, let me show you. Hopefully this works, but it's kind of like a black screen, so I don't know if it's going to actually work.
On one hand, I hate being self-employed because it's literally all on me. On the other hand, I love it because I have actual freedom. I don't have as much freedom as I would like due to financial limitations of being self-employed and all of the expenses that I have just from living and bills. But I don't answer to anyone, and I get to be completely creative with the process for my building projects.
So for whatever reason, when I upload that video, it doesn't come through. But I'm gonna close it out, and you can use this screen record it, whatever you want. But I thought this was a very succinct explanation of what woke is.
So, I mean, unfortunately for him, the Scottish electorate were like, Humza Yousaf, shite. And he's stood down. He stood down because he's becoming a complete liability for the next election.
My resignation letter, white.
yeah. My removal van, white. The smack my brother-in-law punts, white. So
Allegedly.
Allegedly. He's just one of a whole slew of leftist leaders. I was talking about my brother-in-law there.
Oh, right.
He's just one of a whole slew of leftist leaders who've fallen from grace recently. There's Jacinda Ardern, Justin Trudeau, Leo Varadkar, the Peronists in Argentina, and it's always for the same reason. They all stand for high taxes, open borders, state intervention, monitoring and policing speech, green policy, which gives the state huge power and chokes off the free economy and leads to basically communism, racist and divisive critical race theory, gender ideology that harms women and children, and all this increasing totalitarianism is delivered under the veneer of kindness with a caring tilt of the head.
But that's not why Humza had to go, is it?
No.
Humza had to go for not being sufficiently woke. Like the LGBT Green.
So I think that's a pretty succinct explanation of what woke is. So you can copy that, clip it, take it for your own personal use, and share that with your friends. Because that's exactly what we're going to have to start doing. Every chance we get, we're going to have to start having these difficult conversations with people, because inflation and 20 million people coming across the border, 17 million people dead from COVID. Those are not things that we can't talk about. And though censorship exists and all of that crap, talking about these things, 17 million dead worldwide from the coof, from specifically the injection, another 20 million people coming across the border unaccounted for, inflation, depression, addiction, record levels of that. All of these things have to be talked about. The average Black woman in North America weighs 187 pounds. That's not by accident. That's an op. It's an operation. People didn't ever, obesity wasn't a thing in the United States of America before modern processed foods. And now we have obesity as one of the leading causes of death in North America. So all of those things, like we have to start calling them out. And these unconstitutional and these undemocratic and these unlawful laws that they're trying to enact, with you can't say anything against a Jew, you can't say Jesus was killed by Jews, like all of that shit that they're trying to do, all these measures to try to curtail and censor speech. You have to be bold and fearless and live as a 1776 American in the face of them. Because if we let fear control our lives, if we let fear dictate our choice of words, and we just don't talk about these things, then we are no better than the boomers and the boomer generation who sat idly by and let us get to this place in time. Where we are is a result of the generations, my parents and your parents and our parents' generation, not standing up against organizations like the Weather Underground, like the hippies, like the mainstream media, like the banks. Why? Because their mortgage payments were low, their interest rates were low, money was valuable, and the economies were good through their lifetimes. So they were made comfortable. They didn't have a reason to, they didn't ensure that their children would actually have the United States. They took advantage of the United States. Now my generation and Trump and the people around him, like, still boomers are a part of the equation that is the solution. But I'm talking about the civilian population writ large of the boomers generation. I hold you responsible for why we are where we are. For those of you who are a part of the boomer generation who are helping us fix all of this, which is, a lot of you, we're in this together. We are brothers and sisters in arms, and we are going to do this. But that all being said, I have no pity for anybody who is older than me that does not know about Operation High Jump, who does not know about Operation Paperclip, who does not know about the DC flyovers of 1952, who doesn't know about the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Economic Forum, Skull and Bones out of Yale, Critical Theory out of Columbia, which was the Frankfurt Institute. Not knowing about these things does not absolve you of the complacency with which you lived your life and allowed for tyranny and authoritative government to slow creep over everyone's lives. And it makes it a lot worse when you act as incredulously towards people who are younger than you, who are just as intelligent, if not more intelligent than you, who have put in the time and the research to basically acquire a PhD level understanding of reality and conspiracy and actual history. If you act incredulously towards them, I'm a Marine, so I do have energy in me that definitely does want to attack people still. I'm not above that. I have not mastered that. What I mean is that I do experience anger when people act as though the stuff I talked about in this podcast and actual history and actual reality, as I have come to understand it, don't exist. When they act as though, oh, that's just conspiracy theory. When they act as though we still live in a free country. When they act as though everything is just going to fix itself. When they act as though they don't have any responsibility and that they don't have to do anything to help all of humanity have a better experience of life. And if all of humanity is too broad, which it is, then I'm talking about specifically just your neighborhood or just your city or your state. Being a citizen of the United States is not a free ride. And I wish that more people would adopt that attitude, because if more people had that attitude in the boomers generation, then more of these problems would have been mitigated in the past. More of these usurpers, more of these psychopaths, narcissists, and sociopaths would have been found out in the past and would have been removed from the chessboard, so to speak. Nonetheless, we find ourselves at the place we are in time, where we stand upon the precipice staring into the pit of hell. Now, I pray that that's very, I don't know the word off the top of my head. I just lost it. But I pray that that is like just hyperbole and like the worst possible scenario that is not going to come to pass. I pray, and I'm confident, that there is a military contingent that does have their hand on the steering wheel through this incredibly chaotic time, and that they are steering this collective experience or this ship of humanity towards calmer waters. That there is God and Christ captaining this entire American experiment unto the promised land, and that we are going to ultimately arrive there. And that all being said, I'm personally not going to sit back, idle, not doing anything about it. I have been working tirelessly to be a servant to others, to be of service to others, so that at the very least, God and Christ, when they look down upon this land, there is at least one good soul, which I know I'm not alone. I know there's hundreds and millions of us. But so that when God looks down upon this earthly plane, he doesn't see fit to wipe it all out again, because there are people down here who are pursuing Christ to such a high degree that we are doing our utmost to assimilate the qualities and the attributes of Christ into our flesh, into our consciousness, so that we can be the hands and feet here on this earthly plane, so that more people can be inspired and empowered by our actions and our words, so that they will also seek to be like Christ, to live as Christ lived, to eventually do the types of miracles that Christ did, so that humanity is at a certain point no longer technologically reliant for health, for communication, or for locomotion. With that, thank you for tuning in to an hour and 40 minutes of Alive and Thriving. I look forward to speaking with you the next chance that I get, and I want you to have a wonderful weekend. Wonderful week. I'm going to end tonight's show with a meditation, and as the year goes on, I'm going to make a concerted effort to get more people onto this channel who practice meditation, so that we can practice meditation together and we can actually start to achieve some results in our lives from meditation. So let's go ahead and begin now. Let's put both feet flat on the ground. Take a nice deep breath in. And out. The thing that we are looking for here is heart-brain coherence. You want to be able to feel your heart beating. If you can feel it beating, you want to focus on it. And let's slowly start to open our eyes again. And let's close out the day with a prayer. Thank you, Father Christ, for this day. This house is blessed. I am blessed. The audience is blessed. This town is blessed. This state is blessed. And this nation is blessed. We are thankful for the blessings of contrast, that which allows us to see that which we do not want, so that we may move ever closer to that which we need and that which we do want. Father, that which I desire is union with Thee, personality transparency, to be Thine emissary, to be a light in the darkness, a shining city on a hill, the hands and the feet of the Christ. Father, use me for thine will. Direct my thoughts and my actions in accordance with thee. In the name of Christ, give us strength, give us liberty, give us courage. We have courage. We have strength. We have clarity. And we are changing ever constantly for the better. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you for tuning in today. We had about 6 people total get on here, so that's good to see. It's good to see that maybe the algorithm is giving us a little bit of love. From what I've seen, it's like incredibly easy to gain a big following. If you're like, from what I've seen, the 3 areas in which you can gain a big following are dating, bashing on the opposite sex, and YouTube shorts. And I just see like primarily I just see like dating type stuff and fitness type stuff, but not really like that's kind of fallen off. It's really more about like gender bashing. That's what I see people getting the most clicks and the most views for. But my passion is the Christ. My passion is consciousness. My passion is enlightenment. So that's what you'll get when you come to Alive and Thriving. And if you don't believe in mindfulness, if you don't believe in vibration, if you don't believe in frequency, then this won't necessarily be the show for you. So, or the channel, and I'm not the guy for you. So that's perfectly fine. By the way, my goal is 1,000 subscribers by the end of January 2025. So help me get there. Share this content. Again, my goal is 1,000 subscribers by February 1st, 2025. I believe it's totally doable. So I wish you all the best and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Namaste. One last thing, the Rumble Studio, from what I can see, worked really well. So I'm happy about that. Have a good night.